Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're taking a fascinating look at the 1960s, but, absolutely not the version you usually see on TV. We're unpacking Virginia Nicholson's incredible social history book, How Was It For You? When we think of the 60s, we usually picture miniskirts, Beatlemania, and this sudden, colorful explosion of freedom, right? But what was it actually like for the women who lived through it? Because honestly, right beneath that psychedelic swinging myth, there's a much more complex, kind of hidden reality about sex, love, and power. So let's start deconstructing this iconic decade.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand the 60s, we have to start right at the beginning, the year 1960. Just take a look at this classic Lady Bird book illustration. Jane gets a doll, and Peter gets a toy car. This brilliantly sets the stage because it exposes the deeply ingrained, incredibly rigid gender roles that literally defined the start of the decade. You had an entire generation of girls growing up with almost nothing to challenge the status quo.
Section 1. The 1950s Hangover, a claustrophobic consensus.
See, stepping into the 1960s wasn't some instant, magical leap into an egalitarian utopia, not at all. The conservative grip of the 1950s still tightly restricted young women. Sex outside of marriage was a massive taboo, contraception was mostly reserved for married women, and the overall attitude of society was just this claustrophobic consensus where women simply knew their place. To really give you a sense of that everyday reality, think about this quote. A woman named Mary Ingham, reflecting on her childhood at the start of the 60s, remembered her mother's life like this. She said it never even struck her that her mother could do anything but look after the house, cook, and write shopping lists like 1-pound Toms, a nice lettuce, 1 tea roll, or just flip through pattern books. A woman's entire existence was strictly confined to these really narrow, predictable boundaries of domestic expectations.
Section 2. The sexual supermarket. The rules change.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because as the post-war economic boom put cash in young people's pockets, rock and roll and pop culture started to really fracture that old moral landscape. You can track these rapid cultural shocks right through the early 60s. In 1960, D.H. Lawrence's controversial book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, was actually acquitted in an obscenity trial, proving that, hey, even upper-class women could legally read about and, theoretically, enjoy sex. By 1962, the BBC's Reith lectures were publicly questioning if chastity was outmoded. And then, wow, 1963 brought the explosive Profumo affair, a massive political and sexual scandal involving a government minister and 2 young showgirls. That scandal literally laid bare the profound hypocrisy of the male establishment. Those old Victorian conventions were crumbling, and fast.
So the rules were changing, for sure. But was the game actually getting fairer? Well, in the 1950s, the sexual transaction was pretty much understood as marriage. Women gained a sense of security in return for domestic subjection. But fast forward to the new, supposedly liberated 1960s club culture, and a woman's youth and beauty simply became a new type of commercial product for male consumers. It was like a giant supermarket. Photographers, club owners, and just men in general still held all the real power, essentially demanding that women be these blank canvases for their desires. So the crucial point is this. Free love was the absolute mantra of the decade. But free for whom? That's the central question Nicholson's book really forces us to confront. As the restrictive, stuffy climate of the 1950s evaporated, did this massive sexual revolution actually benefit women? Or was it primarily male liberation just disguised as a progressive counterculture? Because, yeah, men wanted to be liberated to have as much sex as possible, but it soon became painfully clear they weren't necessarily going to liberate women in the process. The reality for a lot of young women trying to navigate this chaotic new freedom was incredibly confusing and honestly painful. Listen to these words from a 17-year-old named Annie. She captures this agonizing tug of war between her mother's old-school warnings that she'd end up a tart and the intense, entirely new peer pressure to sleep with her boyfriend just to be seen as a real woman. She writes, "First sex is abominable, but you feel great once it's over and you want to go off and tell all your girlfriends." It completely reveals this messy, complicated mix of pain, humiliation, pride, and just massive external pressure on these girls. And for so many others, these changing times just brought really deep anxiety. Take this heartbreaking 1968 letter sent to a magazine agony aunt named Anne. The girl is writing about her passionate boyfriend, saying, "He seems as though he wants to have intercourse with me, and I do not know what to do about this." This kind of silent fear was felt by countless girls who felt entirely unequipped for the era's super aggressive sexual demands, and honestly completely left behind by this so-called revolution. And this brilliantly illustrates the exhausting trap they were in. To be accepted in this supposedly enlightened counterculture, a woman had to navigate an absolute minefield of male desires. You're expected to be sexy and endlessly available. You had to be game for absolutely anything. But at the exact same time, you were still expected to play the domestic servant, rolling the joints, having the brown rice ready, and above all, staying quiet and cool. I mean, it totally exposes the deep-rooted misogyny hiding right behind that sunny facade of peace and love.
Section 3. Birth of a movement, a crescendo of rage.
You know, the daily indignities, the workplace inequalities where women were earning 25% less than men, the incredibly contradictory sexual demands, and just the sheer emotional burnout. It all finally pushed women to a tipping point. What started as isolated confusion and exhaustion was slowly, surely transforming into a huge crescendo of collective rage. We can actually trace how this frustration turned into political consciousness. Step 1. Came the realization that free love was often just an illusion that mostly served men. Step 2. Women began uncovering the structural sexism deeply embedded in literally every aspect of society, from politics right down to the home. Step 3. They started actively rejecting that woman-object label forced upon them by capitalism and male desire. And finally, Step 4. This all culminated in a massive watershed moment. In February 1970, 500 women gathered at Ruskin College in Oxford for the very first British Women's Liberation Conference.
So why does this matter for us today? Well, Virginia Nicholson's book cover captures the essence of this perfectly. It represents the vibrant, real women who lived through this intense decade, who survived all those contradictions, and who eventually pushed back. They shattered the distorting mirrors of the 1960s, they found their own voices, and they laid the absolute crucial groundwork for modern feminism. Without their struggles through this confusing, messy era, the progress of all the decades that followed just wouldn't have been possible.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative final thought. Did the 60s really liberate women, or did they just change the rules of the game? It's a huge question, and it really challenges us to reevaluate our whole understanding of the swinging 60s and its lingering impact on the gender dynamics that we're all still navigating today. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to In 8 Minutes and never miss what matters.